Assalamu alaikum to both of you. Dr. Riaz, I'm sure most of you will be familiar with from the interview we had in the last session, but I'll just briefly introduce him again. Dr. Riaz was born in Afghanistan to an Afghan mother and Afghan father and American mother. The family moved to America, and then he accepted Islam in 1979 in Pakistan during a trip around the world. He subsequently earned a bachelor's degree in Shariah from the International Islamic University of Madinah and a master's degree and later a PhD from the International Islamic University in Malaysia. He's currently living in Turkey and continues to work as a research consultant and editor at ISRA, amongst the world's leading Islamic finance think tanks. ISRA stands for the International Shari Research Academy. Prior to his consultant role, Dr. Riaz was the head of the translation department at ISRA, and specifically translation of fatwas. Joining us also is Dr. Farrukh. Dr. Farrukh is the co-founder and managing director of Alif Technologies based in Dubai, UAE. He's also an expert in Sharia, Islamic law, finance, and fintech, having previously studied at the Jamia Ulum al-Islamiyya at Banuri Town in Karachi, finishing its extensive 8 years course, and simultaneously doing a bachelor's and master's from the University of Karachi in economics. He subsequently did an MSc in banking and finance from Queen Mary University, London, and he holds a PhD degree in Islamic finance from INSEF, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He's joining us today specifically to discuss the nature of cryptocurrencies. Alongside Sheikh Riyad, he previously worked as a researcher at ISRA, and in that capacity of being a co-editor of ISRA's journal, he was the author of their paper on crypto assets, as he referred to them, or Bitcoin and other so-called cryptocurrencies. So we're hoping today Dr. Farrukh will be able to remove some of the smoke and mist around this concept, and then we'd love inputs from Dr. Riaz as well. So I'll just start off with Dr. Farrukh. If you could, in a nutshell, for the layman, and I'm very much from the layman, describe to us what this whole concept is. I know you refer to them as crypto assets as opposed to cryptocurrencies, but just as a broad concept and how that could be understood from a Sharia perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Sheikh Yusuf, and I'm very pleased to be here on this panel. In a very short definition, I can explain crypto assets as a representation of value. It's a digital representation of value that uses blockchain technology. So because if we can understand blockchain technology, then we can easily see that blockchain technology uses tokenization. So every transaction creates token, and these tokens are actually the proof of transactions. So in different kind of blockchain systems, they have native tokens, and these tokens are actually the digital representation of anything of value.
I'll have to just stop you there, because I think for the layman the question arises: what is blockchain technology, and so on. So.
So blockchain technology is the technology that uses encryption techniques, and it is a digital distributed ledger of transactions. So in a very small and simplified definition, it is just like that. So it is digital distributed ledger technology, and it is different from other databases and ledger technologies in the sense that it is distributed. So the power of blockchain is that, like, the more it is distributed, the more secure it is. So previously, other databases are like they have only one center, or they are actually organized in a centralized manner. So this is different from this case is different in blockchain technology, because traditional technologies which are used for databases, they have a central point, and if you try to distribute them, they become less secured. In the sense, the more it is distributed, they become less secured as well. So they are prone to hacking, they are prone to cyber threats, and they are at the stake of at the risk of cybersecurity. But blockchain technology is reverse in that sense. So the more it is distributed, the more secured it would be. Number one. So now coming back to what are crypto assets, these are actually the tokens that represent something of value on that blockchain. So that is why you can understand also that why I try to avoid to call them cryptocurrencies, because those tokens, it depends on the usage of those tokens, that whether these tokens are used as a currency or whether you would like to use them as for something else, just to just as a store of value. That's it.
So I just want to, on this point, I mean, from what I'm hearing from you is that in and of itself, all of these various, and I understand you refer to them as crypto assets because there's various different asset classes. So traditionally, a lot of people tend to refer to Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency. Of course, that's subject to discussion because that is premised on the understanding that you take it to be a currency. But I'm assuming through blockchain, we could have a number of different type of assets, which could be mirroring or using this blockchain, which just to break it down is a method by which we can generate something that's distributed, that is supposedly non-falsifiable, or something that cannot be prone to fraudulent activity as much. I'm assuming this is to do with the ability to encrypt these tokens or codes. And so that itself now allows for supposedly a sense of value. So let's assume, in the case of Bitcoin, my understanding is the reason why it has value is because of something called mining, that there's only a limited number of tokens that can come out.
Before that, let me just explain a little bit more on the crypto assets. Like you correctly pointed out that these crypto assets derive their value from something which is valuable. So it can be anything. For example, like there are crypto assets which are completely backed by gold. So they derive their value from the gold itself, the prices of gold. Some of the crypto assets, they are just like shares of a company. So there are ownership rights attached to those tokens. So when you hold those tokens, you are just like holding shares of that company on blockchain in a tokenized manner. So like those shares are not in the form of traditional shares. They are in the form of tokenized assets.
It's almost like pegging then in the example you've given, or you're pegging these tokens to various different underlying.
Yes. Even like just as a joke, I can also I was searching on the internet and found out there is one crypto asset which is called banana coin. So it is backed by a specific quality of banana, 1 kg, a specific quality and a specific quantity of that banana in Philippines. So they issued a token representing the price of that specific banana. So it can also be done, although like it's a highly perishable good, but still they can be replaced by other because it's fungible. Because of that, they are able to create tokens on driving the value of that commodity. So I mean, the value can be, in my opinion, can be derived from anything which, for example, a project, a business, a commodity, even from trust. Like people can give something, can consider something valuable in itself, regardless of its benefits, regardless of its usage. For example, like gold. When we talk about gold, if you see the gold, almost like 80 or 90% of the usage of gold is for is used for ornaments or for jewelry. Only 10 to 20% is used in the industry. So the industrial usage of gold itself is very limited. But people have generally agreed that gold is a valuable thing or a commodity, and people, because of that, the demand, because the supply is limited of gold, so that due to the demand, the prices of gold are determined. Similarly, now there are more than 6 or 7,000 active cryptocurrencies, crypto assets, and there every day there are so many. I mean, like hundreds of new projects are basically developed and are coming into the market every day. So Bitcoin is one of them only. So you can say like Bitcoin is actually a one crypto asset, and there are more than 7,000 already in the market. They have different features, they have different qualities, they have different underlying assets or underlying valuable things.
So I'll just ask one question. I think, Sheikh Riaz, you can come in at this point, but just, so Bitcoin strikes me as the most popular of these assets. And I think part of that, unlike the examples you gave, Bitcoin wasn't sought to be linked to an existing commodity, but it seemed like the anonymous founder of Bitcoin, the name, was it Sashi? What was the name? Of some Japanese name? Namoto.
Yeah, it was Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi Nakamoto, yeah. Kind of tried to mirror the idea of gold in the sense of mining a limited supply and building a kind of sense of value through that. One thing that strikes me is that, seeing that it's not necessarily linked to a commodity that in the natural world or the real world that we know, and is effectively a token whereby desire is being built, to me, as long as people of their own accord attach value to something, tijaratun an taradin, right, or bay'un an taradin, then that should be perfectly fine, whether it be a digital asset or as long as they accept it as money, that should be fine as money. And so now I'm going to open up the Sharia permissibility on the point of its structure alone. I know there's other considerations such as speculation and gharar, but that's a secondary thing. I'm just thinking, if amongst the two of you, maybe Sheikh Riaz first, because then Dr. Farrukh can have the final say on this. What's your take on the permissibility, purely from a structural point of view, of crypto, specifically Bitcoin, and then crypto assets in general?
Well, I would address, first of all, this very common claim that we hear from certain critics of fiat money, and then by extension, the same critique would be directed at cryptocurrencies. They say these things don't have intrinsic value. Gold has intrinsic value, silver has intrinsic value, and these other things are then a kind of a fraud because they don't have intrinsic value. And so I think Dr. Farrukh has already kind of addressed part of that. So, what does it mean to have intrinsic value? Something only has value in human terms if people attach value to it. So, the issue of intrinsic value, I think, is a red herring. And so that's the main critique. There's a secondary critique that, if you recall, Dr. Farrukh was addressed in the the research that went into that Bitcoin paper, which is a, a series of fatwas were issued by the Egyptian Authority, the Palestinian Authority, etc., others, where they said, no, 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 no. Declaring something to be money is, that comes under the special powers of the state. It shouldn't be up to individuals to identify something as being money. And so based on that objection, you had these fatwas 3 or 4 years ago where they said, no, Bitcoin is illegal because it's not being designated as currency by a government. So anyway, that's an issue that Dr. Farrukh might address, others also.
Yeah,
Dr. Farrukh.
I think that it's a very good point, Sheikh Riaz raised, that what is intrinsic value. So I mean, I translate this intrinsic value as the intrinsic benefit, that what are the benefits you can derive from anything, and based on those benefits you can actually price or value that thing. So for example, like when we see gold has an intrinsic value, it's not only about that it's when we touch it, we can sense it, we can touch it, that's why we are giving it intrinsic value. It's because of its usage. And then there is something which is called fiat money. It has value but not intrinsic value, because if you look at the paper itself, so the paper you cannot use it for so many purposes. It's kind of useless, or the benefits derived from exactly the paper itself are negligible. The only thing is you have value because it has a government backing and you trust the government. So Satoshi Nakamoto, I think that brilliantly portrayed and reflected that it all boils down to trust. That why you want to hold gold in your vault, because you understand that it has a value now and it will have a value in the future. That is the trust gold has. Because, and why you are thinking like that, because gold has 1,000 years history. So because of that, you have seen that the value of gold has been increasing since the beginning. And why there is a case for fiat money, because again, you trust in the cash itself, in the government, because government is backing it. So you know that like $100 today has some value, and if you want to buy something in the market, you can go and buy it and people will accept it. And then tomorrow also will happen the same thing. So this factor of trust has been replicated and reflected perfectly in Bitcoin, where you do not have the limitations of gold or fiat money. It's rather a system not owned by any entity. It is a project run by the community. So, and the community is basically dispersed, or like Sheikh Yusuf has pointed out, that it's the process of mining. So whoever is actually contributing or being a part of the process of mining, they are actually the part of the community. And miners are actually running this project of, this project means Bitcoin. So in that sense, they believe and they have trust in the system. And because of that, they have put a value on this. Currently, I think it's $10,300 today. So which means that people are willing to give up $10,300 for one Bitcoin. So that's how they are valuing this thing. And because the demand and supply, this is the demand side, and the supply side is already being fixed. So only 21 million Bitcoin can be mined through the system, because it is already in the protocols. It is already embedded in the protocols that the limit is already set at 21 million, and beyond that, it can the system cannot generate more bitcoins.
Mining is the traditional method for, at least with Bitcoin, and it's the most popular crypto asset, I'd say, at the moment in popular consciousness. So, what is mining? You know, if my understanding is that there is some, once again, a use of blockchain perhaps, or some algorithms or puzzles that somebody has to solve. So maybe you could resolve the puzzle of mining for us, Dr. Farrukh.
Okay. Actually, if for a second or for a few minutes, if we just ignore the word mining, then I think that we will be able to understand it better. So it's actually not mining, it's validating the transaction, that which transaction has to go on the blockchain and which transaction has to be rejected by the community. So blockchain is actually, like I said, that it's a digital ledger for transactions. So it records transactions and then put those transactions in a block. Once the block is completed, then it is actually linked with the previous block. So it creates a chain of blocks that which have transaction in it. For example, Bitcoin blockchain usually has 1,500 to 2,500 transactions per block, which means that one block contains almost like it varies basically because of the transaction itself, but usually they are like there are 1,500 transactions or like 2,500 transactions normally between that figure. So first, what happens is, let's suppose that Sheikh Riaz has one Bitcoin and he wants to transfer it to me, and Sheikh Yusuf is a validator, or you can say miner. So what he will do, he will actually pick up this transaction. First, if this transaction will be posted in a pool of unverified transactions. So then he picks it up, this transaction, and then validates it. Now the validation process is contains the transaction itself. First, we need to understand that the transaction is encrypted, so it has a digital signature of Sheikh Riaz, and my public key. Public key means like a bank account number. So it has a public key, mine public key, his digital signature holds a private key also. Like when he tries to actually put a signature on the transaction, he uses his private key. So then, and also it has a time stamp and how much Bitcoin he is transferring from which address to which address. So this information is basically embedded in an encrypted form in a transaction. So now Sheikh Yusuf, as a validator or a miner, he will actually pick up this transaction and then try to put some computational power to solve a mathematical puzzle, because this transaction does not come in a very simplified manner. It comes in a hash function. It is encrypted with a hash function. Hash function is like a 16-digit number, and it has numbers and also alphabets, and it's an encrypted form of anything. So like even like if you want, you can actually encrypt Shakespeare's book or actually like tafsir of Quran in a hash function. So like it will be very unique to that in piece of information. So like whatever you have as an information, you can encrypt it through hash function, and it will generate a 16-digit code. That code is very unique and very specific to that in piece of information. So now, as a miner, Sheikh Yusuf will actually try to solve the puzzle, because the system will give him a nonce. Nonce is actually a number which has to be met, a difficulty level, and a mathematical puzzle will be solved through the computational power you have. So previously, like in early days, like 2011 and 12, people were able to solve those puzzles with their laptops, normal laptops. But now you cannot do that, because more people are mining, and in the system it is embedded. It is set that when more people are competing with each other, the difficulty level will go up a little bit, so that like people will feel that it is a valuable thing, and we are competing for this thing, and the difficulty level is not so easy. So now with the normal laptop, it is very difficult to do that. So they have specific machines for mining. Now, so when you put computational power and solve the puzzle, mathematical puzzle, then you will be able to validate the transaction, and you put it in the as a validated transactions. Once you have a group of transactions, then you put it in the block, and that block is connected with the previous block. That's why we call it blockchain. Right. So this is the technical part of mining. And you may ask that, okay, as a miner, what you are getting out of it? So why you are putting your computational power and trying to solve the puzzle to validate the transactions? So it's because of the two incentives. Number one is the system is generating new Bitcoins for you. So whoever solves the puzzle and whoever is able to add a new block in the chain, he will be rewarded with the newly minted or system generated Bitcoins, number one. And also there is a fees. When Sheikh Riaz is sending 1 Bitcoin to me, I will not get complete 1 Bitcoin. There will be a fee deduction. So like if let's suppose that in your block there are 1500 transactions, so you will be entitled to the fees of those 1500 transactions as well. So these are the two main incentives you are getting. And in the future, once all the Bitcoins are mined, let's suppose that system has already generated all the 21 million Bitcoins, still it is beneficial for a miner to validate the transaction, because he will be getting the fees of all the transaction within the block he is creating. So these are the things, technical things in a very simplified manner.
I mean, a couple of questions come out, and I'd probably also invite Sheikh Riaz to comment on them. Well, a couple of things was you've alluded in terms of the trajectory, just the ability to mine now, from what I understand from you, is so dependent on computer power that I remember reading some articles, and I remember discussing with Sheikh Riaz that it's kind of, there's so much electricity and so much stuff from a resource just to mine now that they're claiming that this is environmentally it's not sound to mine Bitcoin in terms of the power that's needed. But secondly, even if I take the argument that, okay, and I understand the technology, so if people can accept the founder being anonymous because it's almost as if the technology is understood and recognized, and this principle of this algorithm that requires the miners to find the output, and this is something that everyone can do, and they can build a block and add it. How does that then give us further confidence in terms of an understanding that this currency now, because I remember in the early days when I think Bitcoin, was it 2008 or something when it first, 2007,
2009, the paper was published, and 2010 you can say like
coming in.
I
remember the early days when I saw something, the original people who were involved in Bitcoin, they'd all be like these anarchists with like shaven heads living and squatting in a house, and they're like, I wouldn't mind buying a Bitcoin or two if it just just a way of saying I'm against the fiat currency system. But then now, with the amount that's being traded and the almost speculative nature by which Bitcoin is being traded, that there's been currently accusations that a very famous cryptocurrency exchange, I think it was called Bitfinex, actually deliberately manipulated this rise by using another cryptocurrency, and they're helping to create this bubble. Why? Because, I mean, like with any bubble, those who had the holding on of the original Bitcoins kind of will be the beneficiaries of any rise. And so people who had like one Bitcoin that was worthless in 2009 or 2010 could be potentially millionaires now. So if we feel that this structure in and of itself, and I do concur with both of your arguments that the token idea of it just being a token, as long as people attach value to it, is fine. But there is what we call gharar, excessive uncertainty, specifically with Bitcoin, and then of course there's the idea of how do we take legal tender? Because I know some scholars said it's not permissible because it's not legal tender. So I just invite Sheikh Riaz again, and then we can come back to you, Dr. Farrukh. So Sheikh Riaz.
Well, I'm not going to directly address your questions because I think there's a more interesting question that I would like to address, which was addressed by the author of that initial Bitcoin paper, which is if fiat currencies require trust to operate, well, the 2008 financial crisis gave the world reason to stop trusting. Why? Because currencies that are created by somebody, what happens in the process, the initial issue is that the vast majority of money in the modern financial system is created by banks in the process of loaning money. So it's a entry in a ledger, and it creates a liability at the same time that it creates a asset for the borrower. And so that nature of money, it created the need to keep expanding the money supply, and then it became a Ponzi scheme and it collapsed. And in order to save the financial system, then governments started creating money in vast quantities and giving it to their buddies. So anybody who has the first use of that newly minted government money, they have an advantage over everybody else in the world, basically. And so Bitcoin was initially a response to the unfairness of these bailouts. They said, wait a minute, these governments are just giving money to their friends, and that's putting everybody else at a disadvantage. This is a newer, fairer way of creating something that can be used for people to conduct their transactions. But it hasn't really worked out that way, partly because this money, so-called money of Bitcoin, doesn't have a stable value. It just keeps shooting up and down, so that it lacks some of those essential qualities of money. So, that's some initial kind of feedback on
it. Dr. Farrukh?
I think, I completely agree with Sheikh Riaz, specifically on the point of speculation and the price fluctuation in the market. But Sheikh Yusuf has actually mentioned so many points. So just to start with, there is an argument about power consumption, like how much electricity do we need to do mining, which is at the scale where it is economical for you. So of course, at an individual level, it is very difficult, completely difficult. So I see it as like similar to gold mining. It is now economically not feasible for an individual to do it. There are big corporations and companies which are doing gold mining now. And for the power consumption argument, although like some people have put the argument that, okay, no, this is not much, the power consumption which is needed. But even though like there is an argument, but I would say there are two things. Number one is, why do we need so much power in the system? Why the system, or you can say like why the system is so power hungry in that sense, like electrical power is needed to mine Bitcoins. So number one is because of like when you have sufficient power, the system will not collapse, number one, and it will not be hackable. So like it is not easy for anybody to hack it once the computing power is huge, which is contributed by the miners or the community. So this power is needed to make the system secured from the hacking, number one. And but if you think that like it is not going in the way you have foreseen it, or you have envisioned it, so then there are other protocols which can be used, because Bitcoin is actually using proof of work protocol, which means that like when you actually when you mine or you validate the transactions, you have to give a proof of work to the system, that you have to provide a proof that you have worked for the system in terms of computational power. But there are almost like 17 other protocols which have been designed after the invention of Bitcoin, which can be used, and they are not actually so much power hungry. For example, proof of stake is another protocol which is very popular, and which does not need so much mining, does not need so much computational power or electricity. It only needs proof in the form of a stake, like how much stake do you have in the system. So like so that like you will not go against the system because you have a stake in it. So you have to first prove that, okay, I have a stake in that system, and I can only work in the promotion of the system, or I can only work positively in the system. I will not be a bad actor in the system, because otherwise you will also be working against your stake in the system. So this is the concept, and there are so many other concepts, like proof of authority is also there, and proof of convenience, proof of time, proof of space. There are so many. So we can also use them if we think that proof of work is actually is not economical for us due to power consumption, electricity power consumption. So this is the technical aspect. And regarding this price fluctuation, I think it is there, and I truly believe that it has to be addressed. But I think it is because the market is still very small. There are very few people who accept Bitcoin as a currency, and it's a very small community which understands what is Bitcoin, how it does it work, and how we can use it. So that's why I think because of the market is not matured enough and not big enough, the price fluctuates very highly. Sheikh Yusuf.
Sorry. Yeah. I'll just come in on this point. I think, mashallah, I mean, I want you to speak about legal tender, but I'm sort of playing the opposite side here, because just to follow what Riaz said, one of the reasons why I was so happy when Bitcoin came, I never saw any of what it could turn into, but I just thought I just like to invest because I thought structurally it was actually a response to, and deliberately a way of decentralizing the economy to take it out of the hands of the control of banks, central banks, and the banking system and big business. But and even, of course, if we take the argument of inflation and speculation, then speculation happens with currencies, normal fiat currencies, and there was huge inflation when the Spaniards conquered the New World in America, and they brought back the influx of gold. No one then abandoned gold, right? No one said we don't trade in gold because there's gharar, because there's So a lot of these things are responsive to dynamics. And I think even if we take these dynamics of Bitcoin aside, the real potential that I see, and inshallah, maybe we could get together again and speak, because it's nice that we spoke about Bitcoin, we got that out of the way, but I think now if we center on that concept of blockchain, it has huge ramifications for us in an Islamic finance, genuine and Islamic finance way of bringing about transparency, bringing about decentralization. But just this final concept, maybe we could stop on this for this discussion and we could pick up another one. But, there's a whole spectrum of opinions on usually taking Bitcoin as a paradigm and then basically saying cryptocurrency is halal. And so you've got people like several people in South Africa, Mufti Taha Kiran and the Darul Ifta, saying it's permissible. It's just mal. You've got famous scholars such as Abu Sattar Abu Ghudda, abstaining, but kind of leaving it like hanging, because it kind of depends on a few things. Most of them have prohibited it based on a combination of gharar and not being legal tender. Now, for me, gharar as an argument that could work. Legal tender, even conceptually, what are we saying? Are we saying that money only was invented when nation states came into being? Or, I know there is an argument for, Imam Malik famously said, if there was a sikka of camel skins and someone put a stamp on it, you can trade in it, then the rules of mal would apply to it. But that's doing it the other way around. That's saying, yes, we would accept it as mal. We don't say that is mal and everything else isn't mal. Because the asal was that mal would be anything people accept to be traded as mal. So how is something being made impermissible on the basis of an argument of legal tender? And I think this kind of alludes to how scholarship's been potentially co-opted.
Yeah. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go on.
I was reminded before we had this, there's this amazing scholar named Frederick Soddy, who, he won a Nobel Prize for chemistry or physics, I forget which, shortly after World War I. And then he was so disturbed by the way that scientific progress or discoveries were being used for the purposes of war. He was asking the question, why is it being diverted in this way? And those questions led him to start studying economics on his own. And one of his, he was hugely ridiculed by economists of his time because he wasn't part of the club and he didn't learn economics at the feet of somebody else. So he was considered like somebody bursting into the field and he didn't know what he was talking about. He wasn't one of us. But one of the things that he pointed out that I think is incredibly insightful, he said, people think they define money as a type of wealth. He said, it's not. It's a claim on wealth. And until you understand that, you're not going to understand anything about economics. And that's particularly true with fiat money. So, it raises all these questions about how much money is enough for a system. It's not one-to-one because there's something called, the velocity of money. The dollar that's in the economy, it changes hands and it gets used to buy this or that 7 or 8 times a year. And sometimes it goes up to 10 or 12 and sometimes it falls. Right now it's falling because so much money is held by so few people. So that slows down the velocity of money. So your average person is not getting access to money. So there's all kinds of issues related to what is money supposed to be doing in an economy you know, it's been so distorted and hijacked because of this issue of legal tender. When the guys who control the money supply are themselves being controlled by a small number of private interests, then what does that mean, you know, to have legal tender? You know, that's the issue that those muftis haven't really addressed.
Well, the question is, can they address them? Maybe there's certain constraints on what they can address. Dr. Farrukh, and maybe with this we'll wrap up for this session, and then we can, and then we'll have another one in the future, inshallah. Yeah.
I think, I really started enjoying Sheikh Riaz and Sheikh Yusuf insights and inputs, but unfortunately this session is going to end very soon. But anyway, let me just say few things in a very simplified manner. Number one is, like, when we are saying legal tender from the fiqh point of view, we have to check whether a legal tender is a condition, fiqhi condition, for a currency or not. So from the Hanafi perspective, an individual or a non-government organization can print money or can issue sikka, gold coins or silver coins. I mean, in the classical era, these were the two things which were used as money. So it was allowed to do that as long as it is not against maslaha, or it is not for the fasad fil ard. That was the terminology which has been used in the classical fiqh. But other school of fiqh, they say no. Even if that is not the intention, individuals or the non-governmental organization cannot issue money. So that is the debate. Number two is actually, again, legal tender is one thing we have to analyze from the fiqh point of view, but the most important thing I believe is to check how the definition of mal mutaqawwam is being discussed and established in Sharia, in fiqh. Like how taqawwum can be derived or can be considered for a thing.
I think this was a good session in the sense that we discussed quite a bit about Bitcoin, and now we can move into the broader idea of crypto assets and the idea of now using blockchain technology. But first we need to establish what is money, what has value, right? What gives value to money. And then we can look, what we're really hoping for, both me and Riaz, is that you will be the savior and you will propose lots of products. And mashallah, you can share some ideas that will be, because we're in difficult times now. So inshallah, the more we want to take this conversation into a positive in terms of what can help people, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair for attending, Dr. Farrukh, and Dr. Riaz. Inshallah, we hope to pick up this conversation again, and we'll pick it up from this discussion on money and then the other uses of blockchain technology with regards to a broader spectrum of crypto assets. Moving on from Bitcoin, but into hopefully a lot more exciting things that you might be familiar with, and I'm sure Dr. Riaz knows of, that we can put forward as models. So Jazakallah khair. سبحانك وبحمدك سبحان العظيم والعصر الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.